On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we will be giving our thoughts on the Bills' selections in rounds 4 through 7 and piecing the Buffalo Bills roster back together with only 53 roster spots. What current Bills could be pushed off the roster by these draft picks? We will discuss all of that and more. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour presented by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. And Dave, there's a lot of things to talk about this evening, but RJ Melville comes in and says, anything new happened this morning? And Pops Mafia says, I hope your wide receiver room heard their GM show support for them today. I guess we got to address it, right? Like any thoughts on Brandon Beane's blow up on the duo at WGR 550 this morning?
For me, I honestly I don't care too much about it. And I know that was all the chatter this morning was like, oh, the radio guys were obviously kind of like defending, Jeremy, and then a lot of the fans were kind of supporting Beane and glad that that he kind of showed some fire. Like I don't care. I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask, but I also think like you have to kind of look at this room and say, unless you're really getting an alpha wide receiver, like a Stephon Diggs type, like we had, then what does it matter? Right. Like you weren't taking a Matthew Golden or a Ted McMillan in this draft. Like if you're the Bills, like last year would have been the time to do that. They took Keon Coleman last year. So to me, it's like, unless you were going for that guy, then it's kind of like a kind of silly discussion anyway.
I have no sympathy for those two on WGR in the morning. I haven't listened to them in years. I have no interest in listening to them. I mean, at the end of the day, like there can be discussion, right? Like there is a difference between, hey, I think the Buffalo Bills need to add this certain niche to the wide receiver room to make it work. That niche being some speed separators, specifically on the boundary. They brought in Elijah Moore today. I think there's a real honest discourse you could have about, should we have taken a player as big as Deone Walker is with back issues when maybe we could have taken a Torrey Horton or a Jalen Royals there and then taken a DT in such a deep DT class somewhere else. Like there are nuanced discussions to have, but those two guys, again, I see bits and pieces of it because I just don't want to subject myself to that every morning. Those two have led the wide receiver train, whatever you want to call it, for years and years and years, like over the top, carnival barking, shock jock radio type of nuance that they provide when it comes to the wide receiver room. You had their board last year, and they spent their first 37 minutes this morning talking about wide receiver. 37 minutes, Dave. And then they did another 3 segments on wide receivers before Brandon Beane ever even showed up in the studio. We took one receiver in the 7th round, and you're going to spend 3-4 segments on it. And then the other segment in between all that was Sean McDermott has no excuses now. Like that's all it is just shock jock radio, because that's all they have left. It's over the top narratives. It is food drafts. It's sports betting, and it's fantasy football. Like if I hear them reference PFF grades and Pro Football Reference one more time, I'm going to blow my brains out. Mm-hmm. So was Brandon Beane unprofessional? Yeah, he was. Should he have lost his cool? No, he shouldn't. Clearly it became a national story, and you know exactly who all the media people are going to side with when something like that occurs. But there was some truth to what Brandon Beane had to say, and there was some untruth to what Brandon Beane had to say, because typically there is nuance to the discussion. And Brandon Beane knows there's nuance to the discussion because he went out and brought Elijah Moore in today. So I really didn't want to talk about it, but I know you guys did, and you let off the show with it. So let's get into it. For the reason why we're here tonight is to have an actual nuanced discussion on the Buffalo Bills, not a receiver discussion. And we started the offseason, Dave, deconstructing the Bills roster, assessing what needs we had. Then we spent months analyzing all the options that we have. And we have mostly reacted to a lot of the Bills moves. We're going to get to rounds 4 through 7 today. So today, really what it's all about on the show is starting the process of putting this roster back together, reconstructing the Buffalo Bills roster. What holes do we still have? What battles can we expect at training camp? Will we see some philosophical shifts? Will we see some veteran players pushed off the roster? That is the process that we start tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the kind of, like last major reconstruction we have, right, is the NFL draft before training camp, right? Obviously, other moves could still be made. The talk of Elijah Moore making the visit today, but for the most part, I get the people that say, hey, it's only April, or hey, it's only, football doesn't start till September. But at this point, your roster that you're going to take into training camp is largely there, right? Between the UDFA signings, the draft, and unless there's a big swing in a trade or something else, like this is largely the you're taking into the summer and into training camp. So it's a good time to reconstruct the roster before we start getting into, the summer months here.
Yeah, and we're going to go position by position today. The first thing I want to do before we get into that, though, is I want to do a quick recap of rounds 4 through 7. I know you were on with Joe DeRosa a little bit, so you got to have a little bit of fun and have a little bit of the conversation, but I haven't had a chance to get my 2 cents in yet, so I want to talk about it. The first pick, I think, was the most controversial because if you want to play Monday morning quarterback, right, which we love to do, and it's not the end of the world, but I think a lot of people would have preferred the trade up to a Ben for a Jalen Rose or a Torrey Horton as opposed to a Deone Walker. But the Buffalo Bills, they selected Deone Walker, defensive tackle out of the University of Kentucky. You can definitely see the vision here with the Buffalo Bills. 6'7", 331 pounds, 34-inch arms, almost 11-inch hands. He only had a 3.63 RAS, though, but he is dealing with that sort of fracture in his back. When you look at his production profile, early career success. He was playing well versus SEC teams as an 18, 19, 20-year-old. That's impressive. That is notable. In 2022, he had 12 starts. He was freshman All-American, All-SEC first freshman team. 2023 started all 13 games, all second team SEC, led the team with 12.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, led all of FBS that season in pressures as a 19, 20-year-old kid. Like, that's impressive. Brandon Beane went out of his way to say if he would have declared last year, he would have been a first rounder. But then he comes back this year. He has the back issues. He's still third team all SEC, 37 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, a sack and a half, 2 pass breakups, started 11 games. You look at the positives, right? Big body, right? And just being that size alone is going to help you a little bit in run defense. Despite that size, he's more of an interior penetrator, a Jordan Phillips type. Most of his success came when he was not aligned as a 0 or a 1 tech. The negatives with him, leveraging issues. How much of it was his back? I don't know. But when thinking of all the positives of Jordan Phillips, you got to think of the negatives too. And in the same vein, those are the negatives you look at with a guy like Deone Walker.
Yeah, I was on with Joe pretty much from the start of when he went live right around noon. And, we were waiting. And, obviously the Bills end up making the trade back into their original slot that they had at 109. So we got to react fairly soon into the broadcast to the move the Bills made. And look, Deone Walker is a guy you already had taken TJ Sanders earlier in the draft. The Bills clearly have a vision for what they want to do with the interior of this defensive line. And that is they're looking for disruptors, right? And, the traditional sort of nose tackle or 1 tech run stuffing 2 down player is clearly not necessarily in line with the vision that they have and how they want to construct this defensive line. They're taking a risk on Walker, no doubt, with the back issues and some of the leverage issues, but they're taking a calculated risk that the fact that they're getting a guy they hope that they pick in the 4th round that could have the ceiling of a first or second rounder as a disruptor and maybe improve upon some of the issues that he had with leverage and his run defense. So you can see the vision. TJ Sanders, Deone Walker, they're looking for guys that can kind of wreck the game here as a disruptor.
Mhm.
And it seems to be, to me, more about upside and sort of potentially creating negative plays on the quarterback first versus stopping the run. This Bills defense is going to go into this season again on the defensive line, kind of probably how it's always been, and that is high risk, high reward against the run. Right? They were first or second, I think, in the NFL in tackles
Mhm.
for loss last year, but they also had one of the highest yards per carries allowed. Right? So it was a very risk reward defense. That's stylistically what they are. But Deone Walker
Mhm.
is hopefully a step in the direction of bringing the best of both worlds together, reducing some of the variance on the bad end, continuing to keep the good on the high end as far as the negative plays and the havoc plays. And that's clearly what they're shooting for with a guy like Walker. You can't teach the size. We get that. And the upside is there for him to be a pretty good player on this defensive line. So I understand why they did it. It was the double dip they went for. Guys like CJ West and others were available, right, at the time, the pluggers, but they opted for the upside and the disruption of Deone Walker. And so, with that vision and understanding their vision, I can
Yeah.
understand why that pick was made.
And this is probably where WGR should have led off this morning with a 27-minute conversation, not with should the Buffalo Bills have taken a wide receiver higher. And that is the conversation that we have had. Like, we self-scouted the Buffalo Bills at the end of the season. And what did we say? They were like, we want that one tech plugger. Like, we just want Brandon Beane to finally invest. We don't want them to give up all these explosive runs on early downs. Like, that was our focus. And we were so laser focused on that. But in reality, if you look at it, based on true media, the Buffalo Bills were 5th in average distance on third down. The average third down distance was 7.46 yards. The Buffalo Bills did pretty well, statistically speaking, compared to the rest of the league on first and second down. They did give up a lot of explosives, which I think is what sort of warps our mind a little
Yeah,
bit.
and they were not good on third
Mhm.
down. So
And then there's the issue, right? So where we saw, let's create more down and distances, Brandon Beane saw, no, we need to sync our pass rush and our secondary better on third down to get off the field. That's what Brandon Beane saw, and that's what Brandon Beane addressed between TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, Joey Bosa, Deone Walker, right? Larry Ogunjobi. It's all about penetration. It's about penetrating. It's about syncing your pass rush with your secondary. It's about getting guys like I want to keep saying Malik Hairston, but Maxwell Hairston in your secondary with the athleticism to jump, passes. It's about getting a Cole Bishop another year into your system and starting to utilize him maybe in like a little bit of a robber role. It's about fixing this defense, which was a huge problem last year. And I think that's what the Buffalo Bills did. So as much as I would have, like, if it was me, that trade up would have been for Jalen Royals or it would have been for Torrey Horton. Like, and I'm willing to admit that, right?
mhm.
I see the vision and I understand why Brandon Beane did what he did. So I don't feel like we need to spend the first 27 minutes of our show talking about why the Buffalo Bills didn't address wide receiver.
Right.
Looking at the next guy on the list here, Jordan Hancock out of Ohio State. First player the Bills drafted that wasn't on my Bills specific big board. I'm not going to lie to you. He kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit when I was reading his profile. Because that's what I do first. I just go through the scouting reports that other people write and I look through them. And if a guy doesn't really click as someone who seems like a Billsy type, I kind of just move on and start scouting the next guy. So I kind of just brushed over Jordan Hancock a couple of times because they talked about how he was really great towards the line of scrimmage and not so great like in the back half of the field, not a lot of ball production. So I kind of skipped over Jordan Hancock a little bit here, but a nickel cornerback safety, 6 foot, 195, almost 31-inch arms, ran a 4.45 40, 982 RAS. When you look at his production profile, 2-year starter, only 3 career interceptions though with 1 pick 6, 89 tackles over 2 years as starter with 12 pass breakups, 2 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. So it kind of gives you the profile of a guy who's better around the line of scrimmage, maybe, right?
Mhm.
But positives, he has an IGA score of 95.9, which is top 5th percentile in the class. That is in-game athletic testing. not like Raz where like they're testing them in their underwear. It is like data tracking with like those vests and things that they wear during the game. Like his in-game athleticism score was a 95.9, top 5 percentile in the entire class. He's got nickel safety versatility, plus he's probably going to play special teams early in his career, comes from a championship winning culture. He's solid around the line of scrimmage. He can get after it probably like Taron Johnson does in that regard. He could be a direct backup there at the nickel, something I think the Buffalo Bills were concerned about because Cam Lewis, smaller stature, maybe struggled a little bit in the nickel role in place of Taron Johnson when Taron Johnson got hurt. But there are the negatives. He's not a post player, right? And that's kind of what we were looking for with a safety, even though this guy's a hybrid. And multiple reports mentioned that his zone instincts are not great. And, 3 career interceptions kind of goes to show that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in my mind, I see him first as a nickel backup to Taron Johnson, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of start to look about, well, we didn't talk about Jordan Hancock on the show really, so like let's like take a look at him. He's only 21 years old still. From PFF from February to April, he jumped 99 spots in their overall prospect rankings. They had him as they had him as the 146th overall prospect. The Bills drafted him at 170 overall. Dane Brugler had him as a 5th round grade, and the size is nice, right? You mentioned the 9.82 RAS, really good athlete anyway, whether it's the in-game athleticism scoring or just otherwise athletic testing. 42 career games at Ohio State, so a ton of experience. You mentioned not a ton of ball skills necessarily, maybe 3 interceptions, 4 passes defense, in 14 passes defense in his career, but does bring the versatility to the DB room, safety nickel, good athletic testing, as we said. And he improved his tackling and run defense grades each year at Ohio State over his 4 years per PFF grading scale. And so I think you have I don't want to like say it's a chess piece per se, but I do think you have some flexibility with a guy like Hancock. And I do expect that he will probably start as Taron Johnson's direct backup and as a guy who has a pretty good athletic profile. I think that's fine for the Bills to invest in something like that.
And we're going to have the conversation later on the show about like sort of the roster gymnastics and like how many guys do we keep at certain positions. And he gives us a little flexibility, right? Like if we're looking to keep an extra corner, like a boundary corner, we can go light at safety because he has that versatility to be the 4th safety. Like to me, he's going to be a direct competitor with Cam Lewis. It'll be really interesting to see how things shake out. Listen, like I said, Jordan Hancock was not on my board. Deone Walker was fairly low on my board. So I'm not going to pretend like these are my favorite picks that the Buffalo Bills made, but just like Deone Walker, you mentioned all the things that you mentioned there. Like I see the vision with Jordan Hancock, so I understand the selection. The next 3 guys I think are legitimate like value. Like these are dudes that we talked about. These are dudes that we loved in this draft. So I'm really excited about this next guy, Dorian Strong, because I really do think the Buffalo Bills have sort of recalibrated that boundary cornerback position in a big way and injected some youth. Dorian Strong, 6 foot, 185 corner out of Virginia Tech, almost 31-inch arms, 4.5 40, 703 RAS. He's got a pretty good production profile over the course of his career. This is a guy who started 44 games at Virginia Tech over the past 4 seasons, 7 career interceptions, 28 career pass breakups. Positives, he's man zone versatile. He's smooth in zone. He's got great eyes and awareness, right? He's sticky in man, fluid hips, rarely panics. He talked in his press conference about how he prefers to play man coverage, but he's probably going to be playing a lot of zone in Buffalo as well. Solid in run support, wraps up well, not afraid to get after it at the line of scrimmage and fit the run. Some of the negatives that you see with him, not some elite athlete, but he checked the boxes he needed to in the pre-draft process. I am shocked that he fell as far as he did. My guess is it's probably because you'd like to see more ball production with a guy who has that many career starts. But just in my opinion, a home run in the 6th round in a guy like Dorian Armstrong, a guy who I think pushes Dane Jackson off the roster, possibly. At the very least, pushes DeMarcus Ingram off the roster, and a guy who can be our CB3 / fill-in starter for the next 4 years under this rookie deal.
Yeah, if you go back to just looking at day 1 and day 2, you would have said out of those first 3 picks, Landon Jackson was the best value pick, and you could make the case that Landon Jackson was the best value pick overall. But I think there's a strong case that Dorian Strong may be actually the best value pick that the Bills made in this draft. 103rd overall prospect for PFF. Bills picked him at 177. A 4th round grade from Dane Brugler at The Athletic. Bills picked him in the 6th round, albeit it was the first pick in the 6th round, but still. You mentioned 6'1", 195, fits the archetype that the Bills like. Decent athlete, 702 RAS. He can play inside and out as well, but I expect him to fully be a boundary corner with the Bills. Of cornerbacks with at least 275 coverage snaps, Strong only allowed a 36.5% completion percentage when in zone coverage. That was 5th best of draft eligible cornerbacks. And Ryan Fowler's scouting report really praised Dorian Strong's closing speed as well for a guy who really, I mean, he ran only a 4.5 40 at the combine, but the closing speed and the reaction time is there for a guy like Dorian Strong. I think he can push Dane Jackson off this roster. Absolutely. I think, or Ingram, like whoever, right? But at the end of the day, like you've got some nice, fresh competition for that second layer of the boundary cornerback position on the Bills. And this was one of my favorite picks the Bills made because we had talked about him. We had talked about Dorian Strong at length on this show multiple times. And so to see that value come in the 6th round, it was kind of funny how that sequence, right? Because Hancock, Hawes, and Strong were all like within 7 picks of each other. They went with Hancock first of the 3, and you're like, that's interesting. And then they come back and they get Strong, a few picks later. So you're like, oh, okay, like this is truly kind of like the double dip at the boundary corner. So there it was for you right there, and I'm a big fan of his.
The next guy up is Jackson Hawes, one of your guys in the 2025 NFL. We finally got one. 6'4", 253 pounds, 32-inch arms, 722 RAS. Played this year at Georgia Tech after transferring from Yale. He has 18 career starts over 4 years at Yale. And then he had 10 starts at Georgia Tech this year, catching 16 balls for 195 yards, 12.2 yards per reception. The positives are he's probably the best run blocking tight end in the class. He seeks out contact. He takes pride in his blocking. He had a really nice quote in his press conference with the media. He said, "The violent part of football really excites me. There's no better feeling than when you are moving somebody." He's got pretty good burst, too, for a guy his size, 1.56, 10-yard split, tied for 3rd of the combine. So he's not totally useless as a receiver. He slots into that Quentin Morris role. He's probably going to be a pretty awesome blocker on kick coverages, on kick returns, right? Kick returns probably going to be making a comeback this year with the new rule about touchbacks. The negatives, he's never going to be some elite receiving weapon, but that's fine. To me, he's just like a slightly juiced up. I think you're going to get more of him as a receiver. Lee Smith. I think that's a good comp for him, but more juiced up Lee Smith.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what the Bills needed out of the room. You talk about Beane going back to where he said Kincaid needed to increase his play strength. He's kind of like the perfect complement to what they had. Dawson Knox, kind of your all-around guy. You have Kincaid, who's more of the receiving guy, and now you have Hawes, who is more of the blocking guy. The Bills pick him at 173 overall at the end of the 5th round. That's really pretty much right in line where consensus had him as PFF 176. He gets picked 173. Dane Brugler had him as a 5th to 6th round pick. You talk about a guy that he was a Yale transfer. He was 2nd team all Ivy League in both 2022 and 2023. And Lance Zierlein quoted, "Salty demeanor makes him an extension of the offensive line, dips and explodes into his targets to dig them out." I mean, to me, that is the most exciting part of this is like you are expanding that swagger and nastiness of how good that Bills offensive line was now into now you have the option of using the 6th lineman, right? And Alec Anderson, or now you can use Jackson Hawes. You have some options now as an extension of this running game, and not to mention, like you said, the added ability to block on special teams as well. So he is a bit of an older guy. He's 24 years old already. But again, this is a guy that the Bills probably don't care how old he is because what they're going to ask him to do is really not super relevant to how old he is. So I do think he has a small, I was going to say, I do think he has a small amount of receiving ability, but I don't think it's really going to be called upon from him.
Andy says he has a chance to eliminate the need for a fullback. I don't know if we're going to see that in 2025, but Reggie Gilliam's contract is up again in 2026. And I think maybe then yeah, I think it could be maybe more of a little bit of a realistic possibility. But I think the Bills really do value in like having Reggie Gilliam, but who knows? When we get to August, we're going to have start having some awkward conversations in order to keep some of the youth on this roster to have in 2026, even if they might not be able to contribute as much in 2025. The next guy up on the list here is Chase Lundt. And this was a really intriguing one, Dave, because I didn't start doing my research on offensive linemen until the morning of the draft. Like I literally took the day off of work and I was like, all right, I'm going to spend my morning going through some position groups that I haven't really gone through yet and adding some guys to my Bill specific big board that just kind of makes sense. Right. I just want to pepper them in there to make sure I have a little bit of, a little variety outside of the positions that we covered.
Sense of the position.
Yeah. So I'm going through and I'm reading some scouting reports, and it was just so easy within reading like three sentences of his NFL.com draft profile to see that Chase Lundt was an Aaron Kromer guy. I mean, you start with the size, 6'7", 304. It's the same size as Alec Anderson, same size as David Edwards. It's that prototypical size that he's looking for. Almost 33-inch arms, not the worst length in the world, but that is one of the negatives. Is they think the length is going to eventually kick him inside. 6'4", RAS. Out of the University of Connecticut, production profile, 49 career starts at right tackle. So position versatility, no, but I mean, 49 career starts in college. That's a lot of experience.
Yeah, he's old. He's about to turn 25.
Yeah, and then you look at the positives, right? He checks all of the boxes of a Kromer guy. Like, dude is an absolute dog. Like, and you search his name on X, and he's done podcasts with Brandon Thorne, the O-line guru, breaking down film this offseason. That's a really fun thing. Like, I watched some clips. I'm going to watch the whole thing at some point. So kind of like how Eric gets some of these guys into the film room, Brandon Thorne got Chase Lundt into the film room and had nothing but great things to say about him. Comes from a zone-based scheme, so they had him on the move a lot. This guy's pretty athletic, very fluid, functional athleticism. He gets after it in the run game. One of my favorite scouts in the draft community, James Foster, formerly of the 33rd team, he's a free agent now. He had this to say about Chase Lundt: one of the most athletic run blockers I've ever seen at the college level. Executing these pulls, climbs, backside cutoffs at almost 6'7" is absurd. The negatives are his perceived lack of length, the fact that he's going to have to kick inside a guard, and the fact that he's an older prospect and he's only played right tackle throughout the course of his career. So I think there's just so many positives to take from Chase Lundt. I think he replaces Ryan Vandermark on the roster this year, and I think you might see a three-way competition between him, Alec Anderson, and Tillon Grable for the left guard spot next year if David Edwards does not return.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll even say, like, why not also give him a chance to be Spencer Brown's backup, right, at right tackle? I mean, he's got all those starts at right tackle. You look at the profiles, like Spencer Brown, 6'7", 6'8", 315, 310, and Chase Lundt, 6'7", 305, right? So it's like not too dissimilar there. And again, all that experience, like 900 snaps, like basically on average for 4 years in a row. Per season at right tackle for him. Allowed 0 sacks last year, by the way, on nearly 900 snaps at right tackle for UConn. 12th highest run blocking grade of all offensive linemen, not just tackles, of all offensive linemen in the class with at least 500 snaps. He was the 5th best tackle as far as run blocking is concerned. And he improved both his pass blocking and run blocking grades each successive year at UConn. So this is a guy that improved each year. He allowed 0 sacks a year ago from that right tackle spot at UConn, and he has some athleticism. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how, once he gets in there with Aaron Kromer, what they kind of do with him, where they move him around to. But for me, I kind of want to give him a crack at sort of the backup right tackle job right off the bat, and we'll kind of see where it goes from there.
And it seems like that's what they're going to do. I mean, Brandon Beane said, we're going to start him at right tackle, but Aaron Kromer likes position versatility, moving guys around. We've had this conversation in training camps of years past. He likes it when guys move across and cross train, because that way, like, you're playing right tackle, but because you've played right guard, you know exactly what the right guard is thinking, what the right guard's going to do. It helps you play right tackle better. It's one of Aaron Kromer's philosophies. Jessica Nance comes in and says, Judge, do you think the Bills will let Torrance go next year because they will not be able to afford him? I don't really want to think about that right now. But it's always nice to have – that's a conversation for another day. I'm not mentally prepared to have that one. But it is nice to have options, right? Like, Spencer Brown, Deion Dawkins. You have Tillin Grable, who looks like he has a very high ceiling. And I also don't think Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown are going anywhere anytime soon. So in the meantime, even though you probably don't want to move him from being the direct backup there at tackle, Tillin Grable looked pretty good inside in the preseason. So you have Tillin Grable as an option. You have such a Brampan Granger with Connor McGovern's contract coming up as an option. You have Alec Anderson as an option. Now you have Chase Lundt as an option. So the Buffalo Bills have some options, some intriguing options along the offensive line. And we've seen Aaron Kromer be able to get the best out of some of these guys. So it'll be interesting to see what route the Buffalo Bills take. That draft class is pretty sparse. Like literally after the top three, that whole draft class is gone. They got picked over on the waiver wire. Justin Shorter was released. So it's Dalton Kincaid, it's Dorian Williams, it's Osiris Torrance. The Buffalo Bills love to resign their own. So it wouldn't shock me if they're just like, man, this was kind of not a lot coming from this draft class. We got to pay the dude who did come from this draft class. Like there might be a little bit of that, even though maybe that shouldn't affect their judgment. Maybe it will a little bit. Mm-hmm. The last guy here is Kaden Prather out of the University of Maryland, 6'3", 204 pounds, 4'4", 640, almost 32-inch arms, 7'6", 8" RAS for the receiver. His production profile, just run-of-the-mill, 35 career starts between West Virginia and Maryland. In 2024, he had 56 catches for 624 yards and 4 touchdowns. 2023, 42 catches for 666 yards, 15.9 yards per catch and 5 touchdowns. The best year of his career came with probably the best quarterback of his career to his brother, Talia Tagovailoa. And in 2022 at West Virginia, 52 catches for 501 yards, 9.6 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns. The positives, he's checking that box. He is a boundary vertical separator. He fits the archetype of what the Buffalo Bills are looking for. I know our guy Merck on social media, this is what he had to say about Kaden Prather. He's a big wide receiver who plays big, shows up in big moments, and seems to love doing the dirty work. He throws a lot of open field blocks. So he checks a lot of boxes. Brandon Beane mentioned special teams as a box that he checks. I think he's got somewhat of a shot to maybe crack the roster and give a guy like Tyrell Shavers and Jalen Virgil and Laviska Shenault some competition. But when you look at the negatives with Kaden Prather, he is very much just a boundary separating receiver, kind of in the DJ Chark, Marquez Valdez-Scantling mold, a little bit slower than those guys, but he's too stiff to do any type of separating at the first or the second level. He's a just go run a straight line type of guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I expect that most likely he'll end up being on the practice squad, but we'll see what happens, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned he was a transfer from West Virginia, played his last 2 seasons at Maryland. You know, modest numbers, right? 3 straight seasons of 500 plus receiving yards is not terrible. 7th best drop grade of draft eligible wide receivers with at least 75 targets, only 1 drop on 87 targets in 2024. So there's some positives there. He's got good hands. Some of the other metrics around average depth of target and yards of reception don't really jump out as a guy who is a downfield threat, but that's also, you know, some of the result of lower volume and things of that nature. So expect them to be maybe competing for that very last roster spot, but I would venture a guess that he's going to be on the practice squad, but not a bad dart throw for the 240th pick in the draft, right? That's about where he was going to go. PFF had him as the 208th overall prospect. He gets picked 240. Dane Brugler had him as a priority free agent. So, you know, it's one of those things like if you really wanted him, you draft him and you go from there. So
again, right? It's a nuanced conversation. I personally disagree with this pick. I personally had Andrew Armstrong and Elijah Badger on my Bill-specific big board. I did not have Kaden Prather on my Bill-specific big board. So while he does check the box, I was much more impressed with Armstrong and Elijah Badger in the pre-draft process. Both those guys went undrafted though. So at the end of the day, NFL teams didn't agree with me either. So, but it was
interesting. They did get picked up as you
Badger by the Chiefs. When you heard Brandon Beane talk, he was very, very, very what's what I'm looking for? He was just very he wanted to make it known. Having trouble with my vocabulary right now, but he really wanted people to know that he followed his board in this draft. Like that was a very, very big point of emphasis. That's what I'm looking for here. He said until the very, very end. So something tells me Kaden Prather was not the highest player on their board when they picked him at the end of the 7th round, and they threw a flyer at maybe the highest graded player they had at a specific need, and that need being wide receiver. But looking at it, I truly believe Brandon Beane when he says he went best player available on their specific board, probably all the way up through the Kaden Prather pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's like at that point they didn't even expect to have. Well, they knew obviously early in day 3 they were going to end up with that 7th rounder at pick 240. But Brandon Beane was probably just like, I don't give a shit about this pick.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break here, a word from our sponsor, and then we are going to get back here and we're going to reconstruct the Buffalo Bills roster position by position.
What's up, y'all? Khalil Shakir here. When I want Buffalo pizza, it's got to be Picasso's.
Khalil Shakir. Your team, our pizza. Picasso's. This is Buffalo Pizza.
This episode is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza with 4 convenient locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Picasso's Pizza has been serving Buffalo's best pizza since 1980. Whether you are a local or across the country, you can enjoy their delicious pizza delivered fresh to your door. Visit picassospizza.net to place your order today. Once again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, let's get into it and let's put this roster back together position by position. The one group of players I have left off are the rumored undrafted free agents. I looked through the list. Nothing really made sense. And it makes sense that I didn't hear a single name of that list. You've probably never heard of a single name on that list. People in the comment section, unless you're an absolute freak, have probably never heard of a name on that list. Greg Tomsett mixed in a whole bunch of Key and Peele characters when he posted his list. And I think, he fooled me. I was like, what? I did a double take. There's a reason why the Buffalo Bills weren't getting the Jared Ivies who snuck through the cracks, or the Elijah Badgers and stuff. It's just, they don't have a shot to make this roster, and they know it because the Buffalo Bills, when you look at it, 42, I got 42 of 53 spots. I feel pretty comfortable predicting right now. Another 8 to 9 that I think are close. So it really comes down to like, what positions are the Buffalo Bills going to go heavy at for the final 3 to 4 spots? And they can still add to this roster, and this can change. But as it stands right now, we're going to go through this roster position by position, talk about who's there outside of the UDFAs and who we think are locks and who we think are competing for roster spots. And we're going to start, as always, with quarterback. The lock here is the reigning NFL MVP, and that is Josh Allen. Competing behind him are Mitch Trubisky, Mike White, and Shane Buechele. I can't imagine a world where Shane Buechele has much of a shot to make the roster. I think this is going to be Mike White versus Mitch Trubisky in training camp. It'll be pretty interesting to see who wins the backup job and who gets released, because I can't envision a world where the Buffalo Bills keep 3 quarterbacks until we get closer to the postseason.
Right. There'll be 2 on the 53. There's no way they'll keep 3. They have this affinity for Mitch Trubisky. I wouldn't mind seeing Mike White win out that competition this year in training camp. I don't know. Mike White seems like a little bit more of a gamer to me than Mitch Trubisky. Trubisky does save you some cash if you cut him as well as Charles G. States. So, yeah, it'll be one of those 2 guys at this rate. They didn't make any investment, whether in free agency to a lower tiered guy or even making a move off of Mitch Trubisky, nor did they even pick up a UDFA quarterback as far as I knew from the reported names. So it's going to be Mike White versus Trubisky. Personal preference, I wouldn't mind seeing Mike White win that out.
Yeah, 100%. You save the money, you get a little bit younger, probably a little bit more upside with Mike White. Running back is pretty chalk as well. You got James Cook, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis. Those are the locks. And then you're looking at Darrington Evans and Frank Gore Jr. behind them. I think Darrington Evans has a shot because of his kick return ability. I think we're going to see a legitimate kick returner battle in training camp with these new rules. But it's hard to see Frank Gore Jr. cracking this roster barring injury, just because he doesn't have the body composition to really be a plus special teamer. And I think that's what the Buffalo Bills are going to focus on. So would not shock me if he makes it onto the practice squad for yet another year. And when James Cook is gone, maybe he gets another chance at cracking the roster. If there's an injury, maybe he has a chance to crack the roster and really shine. But in terms of making the initial 53-man, if everyone's healthy, can't really envision a world for Frank Gore Jr. I think it's pretty chalky. I think it's pretty long road for Darrington Evans as well.
Yeah, I mean, Darrington Evans every year seems like he's like the preseason guy doing the kick returns and getting like the late game kick. Like he's made a career almost of just being the guy that can kind of like buffer you during training camp and in preseason. And so I like Darrington Evans. I liked him coming out of App State. I have a lot of App State friends here in NC, but he's not probably he's not going to make the team, right? I mean, the Bills are going to go with the same three they rolled with last year. And so that to me is pretty chalk.
The wide receiver position, you got Khalil Shakir, James Palmer, Curtis Samuel, and Keon Coleman. To me, those are the locks, the core four, as we can probably call them this offseason. And then after that, I think there's a legitimate battle for the 5th and the 6th receiving spot if we decide to keep them. It's going to be between Tyrell Shavers, Jalen Virgil, Laviska Shenault, Kaden Prather, who we just mentioned, KJ Hamler. Right now, I think they'll probably lean towards keeping 5. And it's probably essentially a battle between Tyrell Shavers and Jalen Virgil's gunning ability, weighed against Laviska Shenault's kick return ability, weighed against like Kaden Prather. Does he do enough on the boundary as a separator to sort of convince the Bills? And obviously all 4 of these guys will hopefully show that they can be some semblance of a deep threat down the field as well. So it's going to be really interesting. My money would be on Shavers or Virgil. I think the Laviska Shenault stuff is so overhyped. Like I've just never been too impressed with him. I would put him 3rd on the list of likelihood to be wide receiver 5 behind Shavers and Virgil.
Yeah, I agree. You got Josh Palmer, who you signed in the offseason. Shakir's like the de facto 1. Samuel coming back healthy. Coleman, that's your core 4, right? And you're expecting, Beane with, through his inaction, essentially gave a vote of confidence to Keon Coleman developing in year 2, right? To be something. I think Shavers, we saw that big play he had against, I think it was the Jets, if I'm not mistaken, last year in that game. And Virgil got a couple call-ups as well during the season. So in my mind, it's between those 2 guys. I don't really see value in keeping more than 5 as it stands right now. And really, Prather seems like a perfect practice squad candidate. Hamler as a veteran practice squad guy who the Bills have kept there last year. Hamler to me is kind of like the Darrington Evans of the wide receiver group. Like you like to have him around during training camp and preseason, but he's probably not making this team and he's going to be there.
Again, just want him on the body composition. Like, what does he give you on teams, right? Like, so unless he really proves to be not just a slot, but a boundary separator or starts adding some value as a return man, I think it's a long road for KJ Hamler. Claude Puig comes in and says, stop giving away Elijah Moore's job. And that was the news that came out today, right after Brandon Beane spoke with Jeremy and Joe on WGR, that Elijah Moore was in for a visit. Didn't get signed, but Brandon Beane said it went well and they'll stay in contact. If the Buffalo Bills can somehow manage to add Elijah Moore, I think he's the perfect niche receiver to add to this room. Now, preferably, would you like him as a slot guy? Yes. But he has, at least in his time in Cleveland, been about 50-50 slot outside, mostly slot. So he gives you that versatility. He gives you that speed. He gives you some return ability as well if you want to add him to the sort of the pile at kick returner. This is a guy in Elijah Moore who's had some awful quarterback play in New York, some awful quarterback play in Cleveland, just 2 dumpster fires of organizations. We were talking about him, Dave, about like we were literally having conversations. Should the Bills take him at the end of round 1, the year he came out? We were talking about him as a possible fringe first rounder. He went early second round to the New York Jets. I think there's something to say about like the untapped potential of Elijah Moore. Now, am I hoping he comes in here and magically turns into an all-pro? No. But I legitimately think there's some really high upside to Elijah Moore here. If you can bring him in as your wide receiver 5, then just Tyrell Shavers as your wide receiver 6/gunner, I'm feeling really confident about this room, because the one thing about this room that does concern me is the health of the core 4. Because if one of the core 4 gets hurt, then I'm big scared. And Elijah Moore would make me feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy inside.
Yeah, I'm pulling up my I'm just pulling up my notes from 2021 on Elijah Moore.
Organized like that, I don't have that kind of organization.
Let's see. I had him as my 5th ranked wide receiver in that. And these are my notes. Productive career at Ole Miss, 189 receptions. Why is this not working? There we go. Just under 2,500 receiving yards and 16 receiving TDs in only 3 seasons, played inside and out. What stood out to me was ability to stay on his feet and change direction at high speeds in the open field. Lane Kiffin compared Elijah Moore to former Panthers Steve Smith and claimed he could be a first-round slot receiver. So obviously that was back in 2021, but he was ranked pretty highly consensus back in 2021 as like a second rounder, at worst third rounder. So
there were a ton of people having that first round. I think Joe Marino was having that first round conversation with him too. Listening to Lockdown Bills, I think he did a whole show on, or part of a show on, whether Moore should be considered a first rounder. So I don't want to put words in Joe's mouth, but that's just me remembering. If I misremembered it with someone else, I'm so sorry, Joe.
that to me is a worthwhile that to me is a worthwhile signing if you're the Bills. Like, bring that guy in. He's not going to cost you a ton. He actually, I thought, looked okay last year with the quarterback carousel they had going on there with Cleveland. He made some nice plays, and that Pittsburgh snow game stands out to me. He made some nice catches in that one. So I think he's not going to be like the superstar juice that we thought maybe he would have been going into that draft, but he could be valuable to a team. So
Charles G says, problem with Moore is he probably is going to want the ball and is not going to be happy with the part-time role. Yeah, I mean,
that's where he is in his career, though, right? Like, where is he at in his career? He's kind of going to have to accept that, right?
All right, let's move on to the tight ends now. I got 3 locks at the tight end position: Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and Reggie Gilliam, who is a fullback. The next 2 up on the docket are Jackson Hawes and Zach Davidson. It's Jackson Hawes versus Zach Davidson in training camp to replace Quentin Morris. And to me, it's 99.9% likely Hawes wins this. I think you could almost be pretty chalk here. The 4 guys, Kincaid, Knox, Gilliam, and Hawes at this point. No offense to Zach Davidson. I just don't think he can get after it as a blocker like Jackson Hawes. I don't think he can contribute on special teams like Jackson Hawes, even though he certainly is definitely a better receiver, as we saw last year in the preseason, than probably Jackson Hawes is at this point in his career.
Right. I mean, like, Davidson would be the guy that you would want to come in if something happened to like Kincaid or something. But you like
stash, maybe you can stash him on the practice squad, and if Kincaid gets hurt, you can bring Zach Davidson up. That would be like the ideal world.
Exactly. So to me, like, what you need to round out the room is what the Bills did, and they went out and got Hawes. So, like, again, I think those 3 are the perfect kind of combination of skill sets for the roster, and then Davidson can come in as a receiving option off the practice squad should you have injury, right? So it's got to be Hawes with Davidson as the guy that you can call up, and I agree with what Andy is saying as well, and Pete as well in the comment section.
We got offensive line here again, mostly pretty chalk, right? Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, David Edwards, Osiris Torrance, Connor McGovern, Tillin Grable, Alec Anderson. I'm willing at this point to call Cedric Van Pran Granger a lock. I know they brought in Kendrick Green, but let's be real here. Unless there's just a real drop-off in Cedric Van Pran Granger's game and he's not developing properly, he deserves to be on this football team more than Kendrick Green does. And then after that, it probably would have been chalk Ryan Vandemark had we not added Chase Lundt. So now you got RVD, Chase Lundt, Richard Garage, Kendrick Green, Mike Edwards, and Travis Clayton. To me, it's Lundt versus RVD for that final spot. I think most Bills fans would hope that Lundt wins that simply because he's younger, he has more term, he's got ability to kick inside and potentially maybe start at guard sometime down the road. 2026, like I said, should be real interesting. Guys like Grable, Anderson, Lundt, even Van Pran Granger, if Connor McGovern walks. These guys could be legitimate options to fill a starting role. So I don't want to lose any of these guys to the waiver wire to keep Ryan Vandemark or Kendrick Green. So find a way to keep Lundt on your roster. I'm really hoping Cedric Van Pran Granger stays on your roster, but it'll be interesting to see how things shape out at training camp.
Yeah, you would think he would. I mean, again, he's only going in his second year. The Bills did, it wasn't a late day 3 pick, right? It was a fairly early day 3 pick on him. So you'd assume he'd be there. Lundt versus Vandemark makes sense to me. Grable has probably worked his way into being more of a lock than in a 3-way competition with those guys. And So yes, Ryan Vandermark probably is better on the left than the right. So
And here's the thing, though, but Tillen Grable's probably going to be your swing tackle.
Yep.
So, but if you want to keep 10 guys, I have no problem keeping 10 guys in the offensive line.
I'm okay with that too.
Lundt and Vandermark would equal 10, and I'm fine with that. So if the Buffalo Bills are still like, nope, there's still something here in Ryan Vandermark, we don't want to lose him to the waiver wire, I could see a world where they keep 10. Maybe there's a world where Ryan Vandermark gets traded for a 6th or a 7th round pick. Maybe there's a world where like Kendrick Green has a nice little preseason. They can recoup something for him. Brandon Beane typically likes to work his magic with those offensive linemen and trade them for pieces. At least he has in the past. I don't know if he's done it in a while, but he has done it in the past. So that'll be super interesting. And we all know
I want to see a Connor McGovern extension at some point.
That would be nice, right? As much I love Cedric Van Pran Granger as like a career backup center. It's having him start down the line where I'm like, okay, like I can see a world where Cedric Van Pran Granger starts. I just don't see a world where like Cedric Van Pran Granger is an elite starter, right? Like I'd rather him just be like the backup, like the sturdy guy who played a whole bunch of SEC football, backup center that we don't have to worry about if Connor McGovern ever goes down. So should be really interesting to see how that all plays out. Tom Slade says Joe Marino posed a scenario where Lundt would be a down-the-line replacement specialist for Alec Anderson. Yeah, I mean, he's in the same mold, same size. Edwards, Anderson, and Lundt are all the same size. They are all of the same demeanor. They are all, very, very similar. And I think they could all end up battling for that left guard spot a year from now. So it'll be interesting to see how the offensive line shakes up. But, keep the youth. Keep the youth. We saw – that's where my mind was going, and I lost my thought. We saw us hold on to Connor McDermott forever because we were so mad that we lost Ike Butker that one year. And then we got Ike Butker back. We carried those 10 offensive linemen forever. Like Brandon Beane was scarred for a little bit there with those offensive linemen. So it'll see what happens. On the defensive side of the ball now, switching over to defense. So this is where it gets interesting, right? Because both edge and IDL is chalk for about 6 weeks. And then it's like, no, we can't keep 12 dudes here. So like, what do we do? Edge rusher, you have Rousseau, Bosa, Epinesa, Michael Hoyt, who's obviously suspended the first 6 games, Landon Jackson, Javon Solomon. To me, it's chalk. Like all these guys make the roster. Michael Hoyt is suspended. You have your 5 guys here. But if you're the Buffalo Bills, what do you do week 6 when Michael Hoyt comes back? Do you not hope, but like, well, someone could be injured by then. Do you consider maybe trying to make a midseason trade of a guy like AJ Epinesa? Do you go short at another position? Like, do you just see how things play out and assess week 6? Who's playing the worst? Who's playing the best? Like, it's a tricky situation for the Buffalo Bills. Up until week 6 or week 7, I guess, they're fine. It's Rousseau, it's Bosa, it's Epinesa, it's Jackson, it's Solomon. But when Michael Hoyt comes back, things get really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like there's got to be some phone calls maybe being made about, I have to go where Pete's going here. Like training
then you
camp.
Then you have 5 weeks without him. Like then you have 6 weeks without him.
I get that, right? I get that. I understand that. But like you have to bring Michael Hoyt back, right? You paid him that contract, multi-year contract. What happens, like, to me, like, that would be a situation where Solomon would maybe be the odd man out. And, like, what do you do, right, at that point? And so you don't want there to be an injury, obviously. Is there a chance there could be one? Sure. And maybe that sort of, like, works itself out. But AJ Epinesa is going into the last year. Like, this is the last year of his contract, right? So if the Bills can maybe squeeze something out of that, I don't expect him to get a 3rd contract from this team. So not saying I want that to happen, but I'm saying this is an interesting scenario of the Bills because of these suspensions, because you can kick the can down the road and say, we'll worry about it come week 6 or week 7, I should say. But that's going to be an interesting decision that you have to make then at that point if nobody's hurt. So
the conversations we're going to have between week 6 and week 7 is going to be absolutely nuts, because now on to defensive tackle, you have Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders, Deone Walker, Dwayne Carter, Zion Logue. Those are your 7 guys, and 6 of them are pretty chalk because Larry Ogunjobi is suspended. So same exact scenario. Oliver probably makes it. Jones probably makes it because he's the only true one tech. Unless Zion Logue somehow beats out Daquan Jones, which I wouldn't put it past him, right? Daquan Jones shows that he has sort of been declining, and Zion Logue, a year of development, maybe he surpasses Daquan Jones. Pretty significant cap savings if you can cut Daquan Jones. TJ Sanders, Deone Walker, Dwayne Carter, and then Larry Ogunjobi comes back, and it's like, we pushing Dwayne Carter out the door after 1 year? Are we cutting Daquan Jones and not having a true one tech? Maybe trying to by that point in the season, right? He's a veteran. He doesn't have to sign else. He doesn't have to go through waivers. He can just sign to the practice squad and be there for games where we really feel like we need a one tech and just sit out the games where we don't. Like, there's so many scenarios I'm walking through my head, but I can't envision a world where Carter, Walker, obviously Sanders, etc., get left hanging in any way, shape, or form, because those guys are the future of the position.
Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate sort of what Carter, had with the injuries last year, but he's a 3rd-round pick, right? He's going to be maybe buried on the depth chart, but he's not going anywhere for now. I would be shocked if he was. So then it comes down to maybe you see how guys are playing, right? And like, is there a chance that Daquan Jones gets cut like mid-season? Like, I don't know, right? This is a really tough one. And again, this is a kind of the same discussion that we just had with Edge, because like Ogunjobi, you're going to bring him back. You paid him I know it was like $8 million and it got prorated down. So what, it ended up being only like 4 or 5 or whatever it was. But you brought him in. You're not going to cut him now at this point, right? Like you're just going to have to eat it. So
yeah,
it's just tough because he's only here for this year, right? So you got to balance kind of what you have in the future beyond 2025 with the fact that you brought Ogunjobi in for 1 year, right? Because Sanders, Carter, Oliver, like it comes down to like, I think a Daquan Jones versus Ogunjobi discussion. And because I don't know, like maybe Carter gets a mysterious injury and goes on IR or something. So Bills have done that kind of stuff before.
A couple of really good comments, right? Like Tom Slade says, are we buying what Beane is selling that Carter moves to one tech? Andy S. Carter can put on 20 pounds and be a one tech. I don't think it's about putting on weight. Like, it is a little bit, but I think what Brandon Beane meant by that was like if Daquan Jones gets hurt, right? Because I think Daquan Jones is our one tech, but even though he's listed at 320, he has stated in multiple interviews that he plays around 305. So Daquan Jones has been playing that one tech spot at 305, which is right around where Dwayne Carter is. But Dwayne Carter is now 2 years into an NFL weight room. So I'm not saying he's adding 20 pounds, but like go from 305 to 310, right? You're bigger, you're stronger, you added more mass, you're more stout, you have a better anchor. You can be the fill-in one tech. TJ Sanders over the course of this year and into next year is going to get bigger, going to get stronger. He's no slouch in the run game. If you can teach Deone Walker to play with better leverage and build up his muscles around the back injury that he is dealing with and probably will be dealing with throughout his whole career, he's obviously got the requisite size. I just don't think the Buffalo Bills value that one tech position. I think they feel like Daquan Jones is their guy there. He'll play a more minute role this year. You can, when needed, throw Dwayne Carter over there. You can throw TJ Sanders over there. At some point, they probably think they can throw Deone Walker over there. In goal line situations, they probably think they can just throw Deone Walker out there, right? Someone put out that maybe the Buffalo Bills think he's like a tush-push sort of stopper. I don't think so. He's no Jordan Davis, despite the size that he has. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out in training camp. To me, it's going to be interchangeable. These guys are going to be rotating. These guys are going to be in and out, in and out, in and out. It'll just be interesting how the mechanics of how they manage to keep all these guys on the roster is going to be what's the interesting part to watch.
Yeah, not just 1, 2 position groups they have to do this for. So look, they've given themselves this, I guess, good problem to have, right? Where they have an excess even with the suspensions. But
Claude, Brandon Beane said if they play the game tomorrow, Deone Walker could play. That they will likely slow play him, or if they do slow play him in spring, it'll just be because they're playing it cautious. But he expects him to be fully ready for training camp. And he said if there was a game tomorrow, they'd have no qualms about putting him out there. So someone floated to me on social today, like, oh, just redshirt Deone Walker, problem solved. I don't think so, unless the back flares up, right? Like, I think the Bills see him playing this year, which is fun, right? Like, we talk about rookies playing, like all 4 of these rookies, I think, are going to play significant snaps this year. I think Max Hairston is your CB2. I think TJ Sanders is a legitimate part of that rotation, especially when Ogunjobi's not here. Landon Jackson, I think, is a significant part of that rotation. And Deone Walker, I think, is a significant part of the rotation. I think like 4 dudes start. I think offensively, Jackson Hawes probably gets 10 snaps a game in the old Quentin Morris role. Like, legitimately, they drafted some dudes who are going to play this year, like 4 or 5 dudes, I think will legitimately get some run this year. So, barring injury, right, Jordan Hancock could get out there if Taron Johnson goes down or Taron Johnson goes down, which is things that have happened in the past. So, I think the rookies are going to play this year. So it'll be really interesting, and development matters, right? Charles G says get Walker in the weight room. A lot of these guys, I think it's about, and we have a new weight staff too. There could be a reason for that, right? Like things that will unveil themselves as we get into the summer and as we get into the season. So that should be interesting. Linebacker, to me, and this might be just me as a fan speaking, it's pretty chalk with 5. Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, Dorian Williams, Joe Andreessen, Edifon Ulofoshio, with the guy on the outside looking in, if they keep 6, being Balin Spector. Again, I might be a little biased. Balin Spector has just never looked great out there on the field. He's injured all the time. Just move him to the practice squad. But I can envision a world, as much as I hate it, where they're like, well, he's the better special teamer, so we're going to cut Ulofoshio and try to bring him back to the practice squad. Please don't, right? Like, to me as a fan, again, from the outside looking in, but development is development. If guys aren't developing right, stuff happens. Ulofoshio has too much upside. I think he could legitimately compete with Dorian Williams to replace Matt Milano in 2026. I don't want him to end up getting claimed off waivers because he wasn't as good of a special teamer as someone else, so you try to sneak him to the practice squad. I need Edifon Ulofoshio on this roster this year for that very reason. I'm holding out hope he can be a legitimate part of that competition with Dorian Williams to replace Matt Milano.
And as a fit, you knew coming in with him last year, like he was going to be a good fit. And like, yes, year one was about special teams and game day inactives. That's fine, right? But Balin Spector has had chances on defense. Yes, he's played special teams, but he's had chances on defense as well. And the guy just can't stay on the field. And he's had lapses. And like, I like him as an athlete, but Buffalo Joe, he's probably going to make the team again. Maybe it's a competition between him and Spector, but I have no qualms trying to throw Spector over to the practice squad and kind of letting the rest of the group kind of just shake out. I just feel like he's had enough chances at this point that I want to. I'd rather take a look at the unknown versus what he's shown at this point, and I think that's fine for like your last linebacker spot.
Jessica Tanner says, I think Buffalo Joe sticks in the roster. Me too, because I just think he's going to be a bang up special teamer. He's just got the Raz for it. He showed last year to be a really great special teamer. I don't know if Joe Andreessen ever has a future to start in Buffalo. He's certainly not the sort of like Matt Milano type. If he was going to replace someone, it would be like an injured Terrell Bernard. But I think Buffalo Joe sticks around just because of his ability to play Mike, stuff the run if they need it, and his ability to play special teams. On to cornerback. And cornerback's where it's interesting because they're going to keep a lot of corners. But there's only 3 that I would write in pen right now, and that is Christian Benford, Maxwell Hairston, and Taron Johnson. The reason being is because there's a lot of competition here now. There wasn't a couple of weeks ago. There is now. You have Maxwell Hairston versus Trey White versus Dorian Strong versus Dane Jackson versus Jamarcus Ingram. 5 guys or 6 guys for 5 spots, really, or 5 guys for 4 spots. What's my math here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys for 4 spots. I did my notes wrong, so I had to go back and do the math again. I think it's Hairston against White to possibly start, right? Then if Hairston wins, which we all think, then it's White versus Jackson versus Strong versus Ingram. White is probably going to end up being your backup, right? Then it's Strong versus Ingram. Strong's got a good special teams background. He was the draft pick. Ingram was not. You think maybe a guy like Jackson or Ingram gets the short end of the stick there, but it's 5 guys for 4 spots. One of them's got to go. My money's on probably Dane Jackson. He's released and put onto the practice squad as a veteran. And then if you look in the slot, you got Taron Johnson, Cam Lewis, Jordan Hancock to Corey Couch. It seems like it's going to be Lewis versus Hancock for one spot. My money's on Hancock. He's younger, cost-controlled, bigger, more physical, etc. Despite all of Lewis's experience, at some point you gotta recalibrate, right? And Hancock seems like a guy to do that. I could see them keeping both Lewis and Hancock, though, if they cut a DeMar Hamlin or a Derek Forrest, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But a lot of competition in that secondary this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think fans are expecting, and rightfully so, that Hairston is going to be the starter opposite Christian Benford come week 1. To me, that's perfectly fine. You have Trey White then as your third boundary corner. And because you have Trey White as your third boundary corner, the veteran, knows the system, knows the team, that makes Dane Jackson expendable in my eyes, assuming that Dorian Strong can have a decent training camp. I think I'd like the idea of having the 2 vets, Trey White, Christian Benford, and then the 2 young guys in Dorian Strong and Max Hairston on the roster. Not that I'm down on like Jamarcus Ingram, right? Because I think he's proven that he's valuable in this system, but I never really liked the reunion with Dane Jackson from the start. I get why they did it. They needed bodies, but this, assuming Dorian Strong and even Jamarcus Ingram could beat him out in training camp, I wouldn't expect him on the team. Lewis versus Hancock's an interesting one, right? Because the Bills love Lewis. Like, he's been with their organization for a couple years now. Can the Bills quit Cam Lewis? That's the question, right? At the end of the day, will they be able to pull the trigger with the competition's even? Will they go for a guy like Hancock? And, Hancock will likely make it to the practice squad if he loses that competition. So that is going to be an interesting one. And Codrington here, as Ralph Wilson mentions, I'm listing him as a returner.
Well, those are 2 names that I forgot. I forgot to mention Daquan Hardy, and I forgot to mention Brandon Codrington. They're on my list. They're just so far down, I forgot to read them off. And that's where the interesting thing, too, is I said 5 guys for 4 spots in White, Dane Jackson, Dorian Strong, and Jamarcus Ingram. But really, it's 5 guys for 3 spots if one of these 2, Daquan Hardy or Brandon Codrington, becomes the return specialist, because now they're technically considered a cornerback, and you're not going to keep 4 boundary corners plus Codrington. It's going to be 3 boundary corners plus Codrington, or however that math works out, right? Like some of those guys are going to have to go. So if you can find someone else to be your return specialist, whether it's Ty Johnson, whether it's Ray Davis, whether it's Laviska Shenault, if you can find it somewhere else and not have to use it on Brandon Codrington, and they show they don't want to do that in the playoffs. They inactive him every week because of his lack of an ability to back up at a defensive position.
Should have drafted Jalen Lane.
It's just listen. There's a morning show you can go work on if you want to have that conversation.
Yes.
Well, the point I'm getting at is it's like I like Brandon Codrington. I think he's electric. But I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, in terms of keeping your secondary intact and having the depth that you want, you're probably going to want to find your returner elsewhere. Maybe have Hairston return. I don't know, something. So it'll be super interesting. But you keep Codrington, now you're losing 2 of Trey White, Dane Jackson, Dorian Strong, Jamarcus Ingram, and I don't want to do that. Don't want to. The last position group here is safety. I got 3 guys chalk. Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop, Derek Forrest. Forrest, I know, is a weird one to chalk right now, but I do think that he'll end up playing really well. He played really well in that Ron Rivera system. And this is projection. I shouldn't be doing this, but guess what? I'm a fan. This is what I'm going to do. He played really well in that Ron Rivera system, not so much in that Dan Quinn system. Sean McDermott, more of the Ron Rivera guy. So I think Derek Forrest will have a good training camp. He's also notable for his special teams, which is going to go a long way. DeMar Hamlin's always been a liability on special teams. He was the extra guy on the field that didn't communicate properly in that Denver Broncos game when we had too many guys on the field. Like, I feel like DeMar's always been kind of a liability and stiff on special teams. So I'm going to say Derek Forrest would be like safety 3. Hamlin is a nice security blanket as a traditional safety, especially with how often Taylor Rapp gets hurt. But I can envision a world where the Bills are like, we want to keep Cam Lewis and Jordan Hancock. So we're going to keep Rapp, Bishop, Forrest, Hancock, Lewis, because they got a lot more versatility. And we're gonna cut DeMar Hamlin and put him on the practice squad, or we're going to outright release DeMar Hamlin and let him go try to find a future elsewhere. So if there is a safety on the chopping block, I think it's going to be DeMar Hamlin, not Derek Forrest. But what are your thoughts there?
I think Forrest has a chance to play more than maybe even we think this year. I have kind of like a weird feeling that he's gonna end up blossoming.
We said this about Mike Edwards, though. Like,
yeah, but that's true. That's true. I don't know.
That's why I don't want to get too far ahead. But I agree. Like, don't get me wrong. I got the warm and fuzzies for Derek Forrest. Like, I want to beat that drum. But also, I want Cole Bishop to start. So.
Yeah, that's the problem. Well, and I agree with that. I think he's safety 3, but I think just how much they ended up using 3 different players last year because of perhaps friendly fire and him being off the field a bit. I mean, Hamlin was hurt at times last year as well. Bishop was hurt during training camp. Like, I mean, Forrest is going to have his chance, I think, to make a mark. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's maybe similar to the Mike Edwards situation, but I feel like there's like a little bit more upside to Forrest than there was to Edwards a year ago.
All right. On to the last position group here. That is specialist Tyler Bass, Reed Ferguson. They are locks. And then it is Jake Camarda versus Brad Robbins to be the punter. That should be an interesting one to watch in training camp. And then some of our kick return options, Brandon Codrington, Daquan Hardy, Laviska Shenault, Jalen Virgil, Darrington Evans, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson. That'll be another interesting thing to watch at training camp. I don't really have any takes on the punter or kick return battle yet. I got to see him. I got to see him at training camp first. But do you have any thoughts?
I mean, the returner just generally, like, that's a big thing, right? Because it's going to eat up a roster spot if we can't get creative with that. As far as like the punter battle, I mean, I guess I hope it's Camarda. I think Robbins' metrics were like really pretty awful last year. I don't think Camarda had a great season last year either.
Yeah.
But the year before he was pretty good. So I guess Camarda. I mean,
Robbins was good in college, so I don't know.
I mean, so was Camarda.
Yeah, should be interesting. All right, Dave, any final thoughts before we head out of here this evening?
The draft is over, so it's a little bittersweet. We put a lot of, obviously, work and effort into the lead up. I felt really prepared for this draft, especially kind of focusing on the positions of need for the Bills. And of course, they attacked those early. And I think I generally feel happier after this year's draft than I did after last year's. And
I feel a lot better about this draft. Yeah.
I know that sounds weird because it felt like last year's was pretty solid, but I feel better. I feel better about this year's draft than I did last year's. That's just a feeling, right?
I agree. And I think part of it too is like we just took like 4 SEC defenders, like bona fide like SEC defenders, dudes who played some games. Again, call me old school, but I just love that. Like you can't really beat it. Like some Big Ten guys too, that would be nice. But yeah, like an ACC wide receiver last year and a Pac-12 safety and an ACC DT. Like I was kind of like, okay, like I can see these guys developing and playing a role and being good, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, 4 SEC studs. Like that's what we added to that defense. So I love this draft. And you're right. I do think the vibes are better this year. At least the way I feel about this draft is a lot better. Not to say the last draft was bad, because I do think that a lot of those guys have a lot of upside, but I'm 100% with you there. And then you add your next pick is national champion, DB. So exactly. There's a lot of like bona fide there.
All right. Want to tell them we're not going to be doing a show next week.
Yeah. We are. We're taking a week off. First of all, thank you guys. I did the math today. Just about 55,000 of you turned in over the course of the weekend for our live draft coverage and our coverage of the draft. So between Eric and Anth, and between Greg and Anth, and between us and between Joe, 55,000 people turned in over the course of the weekend. Absolutely incredible. Thank you guys so much for supporting us, supporting the coverage, supporting Cover One. We really appreciated you guys in the comment section the whole weekend, and you made the draft experience so much fun. Love doing it every year. So thank you guys. That's number one. Number two, we just need a break. I know my wife is going on a work trip, so I'm going to have the little one, who you guys saw made a cameo appearance on Thursday night. So I'm not going to be available at all. I think you just need a week off or burn out a little bit.
I mean, I went on with Joe, and I've been on a show for 5 of the last 8 days. So I need a slight break.
But then after that, I'm really excited. Like, we had this conversation off screen and via text. We're gonna do summer scouting this year, right? Like, there's only so many like top 10 Buffalo Bills for 2025. Like, there's only so many of those shows you can do, right? So one of the things that we decided to do based off of what Brandon Beane said, right? Like, we grade these guys before they even start their senior years. We had Deone Walker graded as a 1. All the time you see those 2020, like last year, you saw like 2025 mock drafts after the 2024 draft, and Deone Walker and Max Hairston were in them. Like, Kyrie Elam was in them the year before he came out. Greg Rousseau was in them the year before he came out. They always seem to draft guys who had big junior years, maybe came back to senior year, fell back down to earth a little bit for whatever various reasons. Like, because that's what you get towards the end of the draft when the Buffalo Bills are usually picking. You're trying to find those value propositions. So it's like, hey, a guy who would have been a top 15 pick and he come out his junior year has a back injury. I think, oh, boom, value proposition in the 4th round, Deone Walker, Landon Jackson, like all those different things. So we're going to start summer scouting, and we're going to do all like the position groups. Like, we're going to start with like running back, and we're going to look at all the running back contracts, all the ages of what our running backs on the roster will be in 2026. And then we'll look at running backs to possibly fill the role of James Cook. Wide receivers, we're going to look at all the receiver contracts, if we can get out of any of the contracts, the age of every receiver on the roster in 2026, because receiver will probably be a need. For all the people who are mad that we didn't take receivers this year, we're probably going to take 2 of them next year, right? Yep. Because like, it's cyclical, and that position is going to start dwindling, and you're going to want to have contracts there. And so we're going to look at wide receivers that could be available. We're going to look at offensive line, DT again, or not DT again. We're probably going to skip DT. Edge, we're going to look at edge again. We're going to look at linebacker. We're going to look at safety. Probably going to skip corner. But we're going to look at some positions the Buffalo Bills are probably going to need next offseason. We're going to look at like maybe the top 10 to 15 guys to keep an eye out in college football this year. So I think we're going to have fun. It'll make our job a little bit easier next offseason.
Yeah, it'll be like pre-prep work for us. It's going to be kind of cool to get back into some of the other positions we didn't really focus on for this draft. Like linebacker, I think, is an interesting one. Like with Matt Milano, maybe we'll see what happens with him in 2026 because he's under contract through 2026, but not sure if he'll still be here. We obviously got Terrell Bernard with the extension, but what's going to happen between, Dorian Williams, Milano, Bernard, so it'll be cool to kind of get back into some of the positions. Running back's going to be a really interesting topic because of the James Cook situation. So that's
that running back from Notre Dame. I'm blanking on his name right now, dude. He looks nice.
Oh, what's his name? Jeremiah Love. Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. The guy who had the 98-yarder in the college football. Yeah, Jeremiah Love looks 19 years old, dude. Kid's a stud. Absolute stud. Singleton from Penn State. There's gonna be some dudes.
Running back will be a fun one because we kind of we talked about there were a lot of. This was a good running back draft, but the room was crowded, right? I mean, there's nothing really we're gonna do there. But next year, who knows? This could all mean nothing if they give James.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, there's 3 ways you can support us. Number 1, you can just smash that like button. That goes a long way, helping us with the algorithm. Number 2, you can click that share button at the bottom and share on social media, text friends, text family. Word of mouth is how we want to spread what we do here at the Air Raid Hour. So if you think there's someone else who would enjoy our show, share that with them. Really appreciate that. And then the third thing you can do is when the show is no longer live, it is on demand, available for you to watch anytime. Leave a comment in the comment section. It can be something you think we missed tonight, in addition to something we talked about tonight, just a cheers or a go Bills. a criticism, a compliment, whatever you want to do. Your grocery list, whatever it is. It helps us with the algorithm. We make sure to get to the comments over the course of the week and respond. And again, it helps put us at the top of the YouTube charts. Well, the Bills specific YouTube charts.
Yeah, we're
so
not
next week we'll be doing our show with Mr. Beast.
Yeah, Mr. Beast. I was just saying we're not quite on his level yet. Or JoJo Siwa.
We'll be doing the Beast games next week, or whatever they call it.
Yes.
All right. Thank you guys. Tom Slade says he gently caressed the like button. I like that. Claude Pui says, great Joe. Enjoy the well-deserved time off. Thank you. Thank you guys all in the comment section. Always appreciate you. And Dave, until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!